Hello, colleagues. We hope everyone is doing well under the current circumstances, which have forced that this conference takes place online as it is happening. I hope everyone is well and their families. My name is Gambushe, and I'll be presenting this paper on behalf of my colleagues, Ziko Dana, Nkomo, and Bulelo Nosilela. We are all from Rhodes University School of Languages and Literatures. Now we ask, how great is thy dictionary? Cultural articles in the Great Dictionary of isiXhosa. So, as a way of an introduction, this paper interrogates how great the Great Dictionary of isiXhosa is in its provision and presentation of cultural data it contains. So we organized a workshop with isiXhosa cultural and linguistic experts in order to discuss the inaccuracy or accuracy of the addenda that are found in the GDX that deal with anthropological, linguistic, and cultural aspects. So we, at the end of this presentation, we make recommendations for the isiXhosa National Lexicograph Unit as they embark in a process of digitizing and updating the GDX. So the Greater Dictionary of isiXhosa, or GDX as it is called, as far as we know and we are concerned, it is the biggest dictionary in an African language. It contains 3 volumes, and all of the volumes were published in reverse order. In the beginning, with volume 3, which started from Q to Z and was edited by Professor Pal, published in 1989. And the second one was volume 2, which dealt with K to P and was edited by Professor Bimini and published in 2003. And the final but first volume is volume 1, which dealt with A to J. It was edited by Mr. Chabe and Dr. Shoba and was published in 2006. So the Great Dictionary of isiXhosa is a trilingual dictionary where isiXhosa is the language that receives lexicographic treatment, and the explanations are then also given in English and in Afrikaans. So just to give a brief history of the GDX, it is a product of the dictionary project of the University of Fort Hare, and was established in between the years 1967 and 1968. Now, according to Pal, the dictionary was conceptualized um, because of a need for a modern, scientific, and standard isiXhosa dictionary. Because at the time, the Kafir English Dictionary by Albert Croft was the major dictionary in isiXhosa. But then, of course, that dictionary, Croft's dictionary, was intended to define isiXhosa lemma in English. Therefore, it was never really conceptualized in order to assist isiXhosa speakers. So then the GDX then kind of filled that gap in order to allow for isiXhosa words to be defined in isiXhosa, and also to allow those who do not speak isiXhosa an opportunity to use the dictionary. So in order to ground our paper here, we use the frame structure, and according to Camera and Vigand, a dictionary with a central text, front and back meta text constitutes a frame structure. We also use the integrated versus unintegrated outer texts as part of our framing of the paper. Now, according to Begenholz and Tapp and Vegan, 1999, integrated outer texts, they function in coordination with the central list. They serve as aids for optimal and full retrieval of information from the dictionary. They facilitate the accomplishment of a genuine purpose of the dictionary. So unintegrated outer texts, they are not needed to facilitate information retrieval from the central list. they do not add to the treatment of the subject of the dictionary. And we also deal with function adhering versus non-function adhering outer text. So function adhering outer text, they contribute to the achievement of a given lexicographic function. Non-functioning outer text, um, and these include the imprint, the list of staff and contributors, acknowledgements, etc. They also do not contribute to the achievement of any lexicographic function. So we also move on to integrated function adhering text. And integrated, so these are integrated into the lexicographic function of the central list of the given dictionary. Now, the functions identified for the dictionary go beyond the borders of the text, which then leads to a transtextual function approach. Now, if we then look at non-integrated function adhering outer text, now these assist users with a well-identified lexicographic function, but not prevailing in the central list of the dictionary. So that is basically how the frame structure of the GDX is outlined. It contains both function adhering outer text and those that don't necessarily have a function in terms of retrieval of information within the central list. And of course, the back matter, which is actually what we are interested in, is actually structured in the following manner, and we'll talk more about this as we move on. So we then do an overview and classification of GDX essay. So a total of 100 anthropological essays were included as addenda, as can be seen in this slide. So there is also a total of 114 pages of these essays. So it's 100 anthropological essays that are found in a total of 114 pages of essays. So the essays may be classified into cultural practices of amaXhosa, for example, issues like brewing of isiXhosa beer, umqombothi. It includes belief systems such as, umamlambo or tikoloshe, which are belief systems that are held by amaXhosa and, of course, other African communities. And it also talks to issues of tradition and traditions that are held by amaXhosa. So based on these texts, the GDX can serve as a resource for cultural knowledge on amaXhosa, and actually the essays can also serve as, in a way, an authoritative um, uh, 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 text, as people go to a dictionary because they are looking for a word, and if it's in the dictionary, as people would say, then it must be true. So even this form of text, what is in there can actually, depending on how true the information is, but what it's being in a dictionary, serves a purpose where it can be seen as authoritative. So, according to the editor-in-chief of GDX2, it was Prof. Pal's initiative to include the anthropological essays after recognizing that the explanations of the words related to such issues in the main text could not provide sufficient knowledge. So, it would not be enough to simply say ukutwala is, when a young woman is taken for marriage alone. There's more that can be said about that practice. Therefore, it was necessary that more is said, which is why the decision was taken to include these essays. So, for instance, the Lema Ukwaluka, Volume 2, page 934, and the cultural practice is explained in one language using 1.5 page in detail in the addenda, which is addenda 28. So, for example, there is ukoluka, okwenkwenkwe, ukusikwa ijwabi, ukuya endle, ukuya ethondweni, khangela no ukwaluka kumqulu wokuqala. So this is basically an example of the entry in the dictionary, but of course this is not enough. There's a whole lot that can be said, which is what then happened in the addenda, in that over a page and a half was used to give further explanations of that entry. So some critical reflections happened, about those essays, and as you said, we combined a number of people, cultural experts and linguistic experts, to come and give us their views on a number of these texts and whether or not they are correct. So, in terms of the size, we had a total of 10 people that sat around and that discussed a number of these terms. We actually were privileged to actually have the editor of the second volume, Professor Mini, as part of the people that sat and discussed um, uh, these essays. And we had a number of people that were, retired professors that had taught Xhosa before, and we also had cultural experts and some younger people that also had something to say. We also had women as part of this group of people, so that we make sure that some of these essays actually covered issues like ukutwala, which then the most fair way to deal with it is actually to have women who actually have something to say about ukutwala and whether or not the practice as explained in the dictionary is correct. So we basically set them down. We asked them to look at the essays. They were all sent to them, and then they looked at all of the essays, and then we asked them that they come and give us their opinions about some of the essays, whether they were correct, what needed to be said, what more needed to be said, and what aspects they thought were problematic about the essays. So the issues that were raised, which are actually what we focus on, some essays were not representative of Amaxhosa holistically. Some essays were displaying differences in cultural ideological beliefs across languages. Some essays contained outdated information on certain cultural practices. So, some of the issues were that so there was partial representation of Amaxhosa. So Xhosa is composed of different dialects, as that is I think known by most. So the dictionary then focuses on the standard language, which is the Isixhosa dialect, and of course we know part of the reasons why that is the case, in that that is the version that got standardized, and then there's a bias towards Isixhosa, or at least that dialect of Xhosa. And then, of course, the different cultural practices from Amaxhosa that happen within the different isiXhosa groups. Um, so there's also a slight difference in the cultural practices can be caused by the different ethnic or dialect groups, geographic location, which is rural versus um, urban areas. Now, what those entries actually do is that there is a partial representation depending on the different areas. So Ukoluga, for instance, there's Amahlubi and there's Amaxhosa, and there is kind of a bias again towards the practice as done by Amaxhosa and not necessarily by Amahlubi, who also form part of the larger Xhosa grouping. So there are also differences across languages. So the source language does not relate to the target language, and what that means is that in the English, so the data in the isiXhosa section, in some instances, is not available in the English and the Afrikaans version as it was in the isiXhosa version. For instance, the case of Ulwaluko, um, part of the information that is in the English version is not the information that was given in the Xhosa version, such as that, for instance, one instance is that Ukoluga also happens in the hospital environment, in the in these days, which is not at all said in the Xhosa version. So it seems there is some issue of inconsistency, or at least some additional information that might be misleading in some instances in the English version that is not in the Xhosa version, which, in our understanding, is meant to be the version that is the authoritative version. So the additions in the English and the Xhosa version are problematic. So more modern explanations on, for example, what logo is used in the cultural essays, as I have already defined. So some concluding remarks. Um, so the GDX's contents are highly commendable since it contains rich data in the outer text. Um, the information contained in dictionaries is considered as authoritative. So that's exactly why it is then important that this type of information is um, presented in a very accurate manner, because everyone who looks at a dictionary then thinks this is, it must be correct because it is in the dictionary. So that's why it's important then, when a review is done of the dictionary, some of these issues are taken into account, and a little bit more work is done in ensuring that there is a bit more, we don't do partial representation, but actually we do a little bit more to ensure that the different groupings, at least the information actually is reflective of the different groups of Amaxhosa. Of course, this is not easy, and it will be costly, but the XNLU definitely has to look into ways of ensuring that there's more representation and accuracy of that representation. So the editor in chief of the first version of the first volume, he does make a disclaimer about the authenticity of the anthropological essays, in that not all of it is as accurate as they would have wanted. Not all of it covers everything. But again, as we said earlier, that it is commendable that they did this work in the manner that they did, because at least we have somewhere to start from. Unlike if they had simply just put the short descriptions in the within the central list. So indeed, it is very, very commendable. And with that, thank you so much, colleagues.